So we are on the job, a new podcast, Labor and Politics in Boston, talking to Local 103 members about the issues and the things that go on, whether it's at the State House or anything in the public sector or private sector or anything that's got to do with construction and members of Local 103. We want to talk to them and bring folks in to talk about that stuff. But we have our great friend, Marjorie Decker, here with us today. Great friend of Local 103, great friend of the labor movement. Modest upbringing in Cambridge, Mass. Right? Why don't we start there? Talk about your past and how you.
Yeah. Thanks, Lou. Thanks for having me,
Yeah.
and just thanks for everything that you do. I say this all the time to you and other labor leaders across the state. When you are doing well and you are making sure that your members are actually getting good jobs that pay them the salaries and the wages that they are worthy of, and that they also have the benefits, the healthcare benefits that ensure that they can stay healthy, we need less government. And you talk about my background, like where I come from is the fire that actually, ignites me to cheer you on and to partner with you in the labor movement. I grew up in public housing. I'm the fourth generation to be in this country from my family on my mom's side. It took 100 years for my great-grandmother and my great-grandfather, who were 16 and 17, who came here by themselves, and because they were starving in Ireland, right? Because government choices in the UK made it so that they were going to be hungry and poor. So they came here looking for a better life. But I'm the fourth generation to actually see that dream come true. So fourth generation, first to not live in public housing, to graduate from high school, to attend the great University of UMass Amherst, right? And my whole life has been dedicated to making sure that being born into poverty is not where you land. It's a chapter in your life. And, you probably heard me, I often talk about people, there's no such thing as poor people, but it's people living in poverty. And the labor movement becomes that first off-ramp
Right.
out of poverty. And it's because no corporations, no companies are trying to say, we want to pay you your value. We want to make sure that you have time to actually spend time with your family, get them the tutoring lessons, the hockey, the dance lessons that they have. But the labor movement, right, starting with your grandparents and great-grandparents and many of your members fought to make sure that their value is seen through their paycheck and through their health care benefits. And that's the off-ramp to poverty. It's not complicated. And that is my passion for partnering with you and for the labor movement. And whenever you're succeeding, we are succeeding collectively as a society.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, great point. Great point. So you come up from modest means. You grew up in public housing, like you just said. You've always been fighting for the little guy. You've always fought for the underdog. How did you, the small but mighty legislator from Cambridge, become the champion of the building trades?
Again, it's really simple. Growing up in Cambridge in public housing, I watched my mom and my dad do as much as they possibly could. They couldn't do anything more. If you could add 5 more hours to the day and they could actually make money doing that, they would have taken it. So when you see your parents working as many hours as possible, and you see that we're still living in public housing, still receiving food assistance, and still receiving child care subsidies, and your parents are working not just full-time, but time and a half, and it's still not enough. There's nothing wrong with my parents. There's something wrong with the companies that are making a lot of money at their expense. And so then, fast forward, I run for city council, and I have friends in the building trades who are in my neighborhood, right? From the carpenters and the painters who are on my ward committee, who inspired me and encouraged me to run and said, we'll be there right with you. And so as a city councilor, I saw firsthand, Cambridge is a great city to live in. It's a dynamic city. It's changing. There's a lot of economic development and growth there. But I needed it to be not at the expense of people who were building these buildings and companies or the residents who live there. Like, that wealth and those benefits need to be shared by everybody. And so I would always say, if you're going to build in Cambridge, great. I want those tax revenue dollars that your company will bring, because I love making sure we have money to put into youth sports, senior services, housing. But it can't be that people who are working on those projects are also still either living in public housing or can't afford to live in Cambridge. And when we're not paying people those wages, what we do know is that we in government, local, state, and federal, we're paying. We're paying when they come into the emergency room because they got hurt in the job. or they got sick and they can't go to work because they didn't get preventative care, or paying when their kids are not doing well in school because they weren't able to actually ensure that they had enough food, that they weren't hungry, that they were actually had good sleeping conditions. And we're paying the price when we don't actually force the private sector or even the public sector, when we're not paying people wages that truly, authentically allow them to work hard and take care of their health and their family and have security through housing and food and education. So it was never a question of when did I become such a champion of the building trades. It's been, I'm grateful to the building trades and all of the labor movement, the SEIUs, the Unites, the educational unions. All of those folks are making sure that we actually need less government, and that people are thriving and healthy and are able to support their family. And what's the point of living if you work really hard and you can't take care of your family? I mean, and there's no joy in that. And so what you do, what everybody does in the labor movement, not only do you ensure that people are getting what they deserve, you're also ensuring that we live in a community that is allowed to have joy. And without joy, you don't actually have hope, and you don't actually have a quality of life that is worth striving for.
Sure. When we get to the House of Representatives, I know you worked with Marty Walsh a lot, right? Hand in hand. And for the building trades, Marty Walsh is a building trade guy. He's a laborer. He's a Dorchester guy. He worked with a lot of our members, and it was always, you get a bill, you go see Marty, and you go see Marjorie in the House of Representatives in Massachusetts. And Marty, obviously, has moved on. He became the mayor. He became the Secretary of Labor. And now it feels like in the House, it's like Labor's got a bill. We got to go see Marjorie. Marjorie's not a laborer. Marjorie didn't grow up with a hard hat on. But for someone to come and understand what the building trades needs are and what they need legislatively, you've really carried that mantra.
Because I'm the other side. Yeah. I'm the other side of the coin of Marty Walsh. I'm what happens in childhood when your parents aren't so lucky to actually get jobs that allow them to have prevailing wages, health care benefits, or secure a good retirement, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't have to be, your family doesn't have to have been a part of the labor movement, but you could be like so many thousands of families in Massachusetts whose families are not lucky and fortunate. It shouldn't be a privilege. Getting prevailing wage, getting health care benefits, that shouldn't be a privilege that you only get when you're part of a union. But that really is almost how you almost only get that, especially if you're working an hourly wage job in this country. And so it's the other side of that. I know the risks. And my mom, by the way, she worked at a nursing home as a nurse's aide, always wanted to be a nurse. I watched her my whole life try to actually go back to high school, and she had to keep quitting because she had to work overtime to take care of us and literally just get food on the table. And it still wasn't enough. There are nights where we went hungry, nights where our neighbors didn't have an extra egg or a piece of bread, or the tab at the corner store was already too high. I mean, this is the experience of so many families in our state who are working. Still, that's their experience. If my mom then joined the union. SEIU came knocking on the doors for her. And she had no experience to like what organized labor was. She helped organize because it sounded right. Yeah, I worked my ass off and I should be getting paid more to take care of my family. And so for a couple of years, she was part of the SEIU. She was a shop steward. I went to conferences with her, and then they union busted. And then they actually literally bought people out of being a member of the union. And then she was the last one standing, and they tried to get rid of her. And the way she finally ended up having to leave the job is because they would understaff people, and she would be lifting patients that she cared about, and she injured herself. So they tried to fire her. And at that point, I was in my 20s, and that's when I discovered Legal Services, another group of like unsung heroes that I will like go to the wall for. And so this is, it's not just my experience, but I also know that my family's experience represents that of so many thousands of people, and who have it even harder than my family did, right? Now maybe language is a barrier, right? Mm-hmm. The color of their skin is a barrier in terms of discrimination, of not even having the ability to enter a low-wage job or the security of keeping that low-wage job. When workers organize and they have the right to actually negotiate their value, we know that families are healthier and stronger. And ultimately, it's a nonpartisan issue because we need less government.
Yeah.
It's simple as that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I've met your mom a few times at events in Cambridge with you. Your mom's very, very wonderful. You talk so highly of her. It's so admirable to see how close you are with your family. I feel the same way, obviously, about my family. Most of us feel the same way about our families. And to see you bring your mom along and use her as a power of example of your upbringing and how you legislate today, it's just so admirable how you do that. That's awesome.
Well, I think all of us, right? I think you, Lou. I think the work that you do, the organizing you do, I'm so grateful of watching it, how like inclusive you are and making sure that everybody has access to the American dream through a union, not just those who were fortunate enough to have grandparents or fathers or uncles or brothers, right? You brought a lot of people into the union who don't look like you and who don't look like me, whose families don't come from Ireland or Italy.
Yep.
And it's important.
Yeah.
It's important that our workforce and our unions and our government look like our neighbors. And
100%.
I will always be grateful for the work that you and labor leaders like you who understand the importance of like bringing more people in.
Yeah, we've been trying to do that the last few years, even more so. We've always been open and inclusive, and we're trying to continue that because the city of Boston is important to us. City of Cambridge is important to us. Quincy, surrounding communities. We want our membership to look like our city, not like they're shipping in these people from New Hampshire or anywhere else to come and work in the city of Boston. We want our neighbors, to have good jobs here at Local 103. You're talking about Cambridge. I've been in the business a little over 30 years now, and Harvard has been a huge economic engine for our members.
Yeah.
MIT and other colleges and hospitals. And for the last 20 or so years, even before Kendall Square was Kendall Square, whenever we would go over as a building trades, as groups to go over there and fight for good jobs, you were always there at the forefront fighting for those jobs. Kendall Square, I don't think, would be Kendall Square today the way it is for the building trades and for the research community if it wasn't for the work that you've done. Talk a little bit about how that you've struck that nerve with the big economic engines in Cambridge and how you've intertwined and brought labor to the table to make sure they had a seat there.
Yeah, I'm really proud of how our community has continued to be an economic engine for the state and the country. But I was also really clear because I was on the city council in those years where we were taking those zoning votes to make it possible. It could have been outside of Cambridge. But what I knew and what I had to keep driving home is that getting these companies here, the life sciences, the high tech, it meant that there was more tax dollars for Cambridge. And those tax dollars are what we invest in our schools, our after-school programs, our food security programs, our senior programs, the academic programming that we can provide young people in Cambridge. Those tax dollars are an important lifeline to making sure that people in Cambridge who aren't born on first base have the opportunity and the resources to get there, right? And so, but it also meant that I needed to make sure that, I would talk to like contractors and say, they'd say, Cambridge should be so grateful. We're bringing all these tax dollars. And I'm like, yeah, but the person who lives across the street, who you're not even employing to live there, to work there. Never mind, you're not even employing them at the coffee shop that cost, $8 a cup. They can't afford the coffee, and you're not employing them to work at the coffee shop. And if you do, can they still afford your $8 coffee? So I think it's about talking about this ecosystem, right, in a way that says, we need to make sure everybody wins here. So I wanted good economic development that made sense for everyone, not just the contractor and not just the company that ultimately would land there. But did it make sense for those who were doing the work? Can you work on this project and afford to live in Cambridge? Can you work on this project and afford to take care of your family comfortably and not have to work a second job? Can you grow up in my community and actually have a pathway, a direct pathway to actually working in that company through the kinds of education that we need to offer all of our families and all of the additional enrichment programs? Can we make sure that jobs that are being built in Cambridge, that young people have the opportunity and the pathways to actually become one of those union members? And we've done a lot of work around that, right? Around the building pathways and making sure that young people could see a path to the building trades as well, both college-bound and non-college bound. And I think that work has been really important. When I first started as a city councilor, I would meet with, it was a very small group of women who were in the trades, Mostly, I met with them in the painters union and the carpenters because those were my friends who were in those unions. And there's an amazing woman, Lori Sutherland, who was out of the painters union. And what would it take for women in Cambridge, right, to see themselves actually doing this work and being able to, have the wages? And I would say, for me, that foundation of working with not only the building trades, but unions across the city and working with my community and building those partnerships and that vision that says this is a win-win for all of us, but let's talk about how we get there because it doesn't just happen. I translate that into, what are we doing today to make sure that, this can be the opportunity for people no matter where they live, not just in Cambridge, right, but across the state. Whether, we're championing legislation that ensures that we put more apprentices on a job. But only because I was a city councilor did I understand also this, the differences in apprenticeship programs. There's your uncle's cousin's friend who's an apprentice that's required on the job. And then there's the state certified apprenticeship programs where you're mostly getting through the labor movement, where we're actually training young people or anybody, because you don't have to be young to come in as an apprentice, right? I know people who are my age who've gone in.
Yeah.
And, I also know a lot of people with college degrees who realize this is the place to be. And it requires commitment. It requires a lot of intellect. And it requires a lot of training to get these jobs. And you guys make it available. You're not coming out carrying a lot of debt.
Right.
You're not carrying any debt. And as long as we do our job and protect the economy here, you're going to have a job. And you're going to have a job that takes care of you not only while you're working, but also allows you the dignity to retire. And so, I'm just tying back sort of what I've learned at the local level. I would not have understood the importance of a project labor agreement. I would not have understood what a memorandum of understanding means, right? But this is the ecosystem. These are the conversations that, local government, community residents, and the labor movement have to say, how do we make this work for all of us? And my goal in running for state representative was to say, how do we make sure that families and people, not just in my city, but across the state have these opportunities as well? And I'd like to think it's that experience that I have either both from growing up and seeing my own life experience, but also knowing the kind of partnerships that existed at the local level and really understanding what does a win-win really look like, and are we making sure that everybody needs to be at that table when we call it a win-win? Does it reflect the people that we really want to center?
Right. You mentioned project labor agreements, which is a Bible for building trades folks. Guarantees security on the job. It guarantees good wages, good benefits, working conditions. For a city and town, it guarantees traffic mitigation. It guarantees parking is not going to be a problem, and hours of work and noise, all that stuff that is important to a community when a construction project is coming together. And we fight like hell for PLAs all the time, and it's a struggle because there's a anti-union movement that doesn't support PLAs, and we're always fighting against in their rhetoric on why they're not good. But you're someone that's always believed in PLAs. You just mentioned it, but it would be an understatement to say the last couple of years that you supported a resolution for PLAs in public construction in Massachusetts. You didn't just support that resolution. You championed that resolution, and you pushed hard and fought like hell for that resolution to get passed. Now, you're one person in the State House. How did you build up kind of a coalition of people to sign on and to get people on to some legislation that was so important to the trades? How did you come up with that and do that?
Honestly, you just talk about it, right? Everybody should be fighting for a project labor agreement. The idea that this is just something that benefits unions is nonsense.
That's right.
Right? Everybody benefits from a project labor agreement. Non-union companies benefit from a project labor agreement. And you just mentioned a few of the things that, for people who don't know what a PLA is or a project labor agreement, it's a conversation between the person who's going to take on the cost of the project. In this case, my experience was with cities, right? Or now we're talking states. We have X amount of dollars, right, to spend on improving or creating something. We're going to bring in a contractor that promises to meet the deadline, that promises us they're going to be honest about what the costs are. What happens with these project biddings is that we have to take often the lowest bidder. Well, people will come in and lie about the cost of the job. And then they do these changes when you're stuck. Once you're signed on, you're like, great, we can save X amount of dollars less by working with you. that company usually knows that there's going to be a work change halfway through this when they're like, oh, we didn't realize that this needed to be done, or the materials that we thought we could use, we now need more expensive materials. Project labor agreement says we're just going to all be honest about what the cost is, what the agreements are, whether it's traffic mitigation in a community, whether it means you're going to have a certain number of people locally who are working on a job. It's a conversation that you have before the project starts, and it makes everybody actually transparent and honest so they can't lie about the real cost, whether the cost is in dollars or in time or in the impacts on the community. And so I think when we talk about what a project labor agreement does, we have to actually not even use those words PLA,
Right.
because that has become like a trigger, right?
Yeah, lightning rod, yeah.
Yeah, become a lightning rod.
From the other side, right.
And so I talked to colleagues about, what it means. Do you want your community to be able to guarantee that the job gets done in a certain amount of time at a certain cost? And because we've all seen in our communities, if you've ever served at the local level, you see those costs always go up. If you've ever done a construction project on your house, right, you can see that.
Yeah.
So I think that a PLA is, again, if you just pull, the question is, who's against PLAs? And what do they benefit by not having a PLA? It's a very small group of people who don't benefit. Governments always benefit from PLAs. Taxpayers always benefit from PLAs. Workers always benefit from PLAs. Neighborhoods always benefit from PLAs. Who doesn't benefit always from a PLA? Well, it's going to be contractors and companies that ahead of time, they know they're coming in to change the game.
That's right.
So that they can increase their profits. That there's no other argument that works for a PLA that I have been able to read. And there's been stuff out there, but it's pretty light on the criticism of why a PLA exists.
And the folks that are looking to exploit workers, right? They don't want any PLAs because there's guaranteed protections baked into a PLA.
That's right. There you go.
I can't cheat my employees if you got a PLA in the job.
That's right.
Yep. So we see a lot of that, and we see a lot of that. Beyond the PLA stuff up at the legislature, what other kind of worker-friendly measures are you working on?
Yeah.
That you see up at the State House?
So there's a few, right? Over the years, we've been working really hard, and, you have been a great champion of this, but we've been working really hard with both labor and with climate activists to make sure that when we do clean energy work in our state, that it's not at the cost of workers again. That all of those incredible workers' protections around safety and wages that have been fought for decades, that actually gets baked in to all of the clean energy work. So we've had some wins on that. There's more that down the road that we're still looking at. I would also say the Workers' Protection Act. We're looking at making sure, so Project 2025 is more than 50% implemented, folks. We're not even in a full year into this presidency. They told us what they were going to do. If you haven't read it, go online. They told us what they were going to do. They lied and said, well, we don't really mean it. They're 47% implementation through. And one of the biggest things that they have actually put as a goal was to actually roll back the right to organize for workers, to roll back agreements that have actually already helped people with collective bargaining. One of the first things this president did was to go ahead and do some executive orders to roll back those rights. He fired the general counsel from the National Labor Relations Board. That was in Project 2025. They did it. Put him in with an anti-union person and was told, by the way, do not take up any issues legally that don't align with our politics. That's not how this is supposed to work.
Right.
Politics is not supposed to dictate the interpretation of the law at the NLRB. It's supposed to be protecting workers based on laws that were actually passed. And we know that the right to organize in the private sector is next on their list. They're waiting for a quorum. They have 2 more positions that they have to fill on the NLRB board. They're on their way to doing it. And we know one of the first things they're going to do is pull away the right to organize for workers. And so we have legislation that we're pushing, and it's making really good progress right now that would be triggered if the NLRB actually takes away the right to organize, as they've said that they're going to, that this bill would then guarantee the right to organize for private sector workers. And we also know that the president, through an executive order, already pulled back the protections for workers to not actually be forced to sit to anti-worker propaganda from companies, and we've included that in our bill as well. So those are rights that have been won, taken away by this president. They're on their way to taking away more. So we have legislation that would step in and say, well, Massachusetts is going to protect workers here in Massachusetts. And we've also looked at legislation that would increase apprenticeships on the job, any state certified apprenticeship, right? And so that means that we want to continue to make sure that our workforce I can tell you there was construction project housing being built near my home, and it was going up, and it did not have any. There were no signatories on the project that were union signatories. Okay, maybe there was one. I won't say who that is, but often, if you put one union on a job, the developers like to say, "Oh, we're a union," but only I won't say which
we
one.
know better, right?
Right, only one, right? But all the others aren't, and they had to actually take down this building and start over again because the blueprints weren't being read correctly, and it's because they didn't have trained people. And this is about safety, right? We look at
Absolutely.
those buildings collapsing in Miami. Well, I you know this. I don't have to say this to you, but when you have trained people who are in state certified apprenticeship programs doing the work, and it's rigorous for anyone who thinks getting into a union means that it's easy, it's for people who don't go to college or drop out of high school. You're wrong. Actually, you have to have your high school degree in some capacity, and it's not easy. I would not pass most apprenticeship programs in the state, right? I mean, it's really the critical thinking skills that it requires, the commitment, the determination, the discipline that it requires. But there's a reason that training ensures that our buildings are safe, that the air that we're breathing is safe, that the water that we're drinking is safe, that if there's not only an earthquake, but other things that are happening that are shaking the infrastructure right now, that the infrastructure is sound, that the materials being used aren't actually poisoning us.
Right.
That's what it means to have state certified trained apprenticeship. So we have a bill that would increase the number of apprentices on those jobs to make sure that we continue to expand the workforce that will keep us safe.
That's awesome. And you talk about the infrastructure and the need for qualified, skilled workforce. Half our roads and bridges here in the Commonwealth are in a state of disrepair.
That's
We
right.
got to build some bridges.
And we need to make sure they're built not with the lowest bidder who doesn't actually have trained, skilled workforce, right?
That's right.
But who's coming at a
cutting
cost.
corners, right.
That's not cutting costs, that it's at a predictable cost for the city, the state, and with a workforce that is actually trained to build and knows what they're doing.
Yeah, Massachusetts definitely, with your help, you behind it, leading the way, always led the way in workforce development, empowering workers to achieve more. Over the last 30 years, nationally, people didn't really recognize unions and kind of took them for granted, took workers for granted. And we're seeing a turn now where workers are kind of, I'm not going to say going astray, but they're not just putting up with the status quo politically anymore. How do you see that playing out? And do you see our party, the Democratic Party, able to get workers back? Because it seems like it's really a problem.
Well,
lose the working force.
I think when it's like for those of us who grew up in poverty, and then we see our kids, we work hard to give our kids the opportunities that we didn't have, and you always worry what are they missing if they don't have to work as hard as we did and can take for granted, just whether it's going to a club baseball team or getting an extra pair of sneakers that they wanted, right? Those were not things that I had access to as a kid.
Yeah.
And so you always want to make sure that your kids understand what it means to have those things, right? That their values are there. I think that's where we are in the labor movement, right? And I think you hit this at the celebration of the 125th anniversary. Congratulations, by the way, right? But that 125 years, I think what you did was really important because it reminds not only your members, but it reminds everybody that what you have, if you're fortunate enough to get through an apprenticeship program and to be able to work on a job that pays prevailing wages in healthcare, that didn't just happen. It was actually not even just our ancestors that are not rememberable, that we can't remember, but it was our grandparents and great-grandparents. Not that in our lifetime, in the last 100 years, and in case of IBEW, 125 years ago, they had to fight for that. They were the immigrants in this country that the status quo did not want them to actually have, better wages and better health care. They wanted to work them to their death. And that's what happened to workers in this country. They were seen as disposable. They were no different than the machinery that, still, and we haven't even gotten into AI, but the machinery that they try to replace them with, they would work you to your bones. That's where the saying came from. But it's the grandparents and the great-grandparents who fought hard and said, no, our skills are worth something and our lives are worth something, and gave us today a better life. And I think having to take, for those in the workforce who are Democrats, and particularly those who are in unionized jobs, the protections and, more importantly, the wages that you get and the protections you get on the job didn't just happen, right? And so part of that is, how do we remind people that people sacrifice their lives, literally sacrifice their lives, to make sure that you had access to good paying jobs, healthcare, training, and that they don't want you to remember that because they're taking it away from us every day. Trump made it a promise. 2025 was not just like in theory. And everybody that wrote 2025 is in the administration, and they're being successful. So at the end of the day, I think as a Democratic Party and as voting people, we have to decide, if you don't have a paycheck, then other things that maybe this administration stands for means nothing to you if you can't pay your bills and you can't pay your food bill and you can't take care of your kids. So at the end of the day, I think as Democrats, we have to remind ourselves, who are we centering? What are we centering? And being able to take care of your family, that means having access to the training, the education, the skills, the wages, the health care. And when we lose that, which they are working hard to make sure we lose that, they are happy to see us as disposable cogs again and replace us with not only machinery, but now with AI.
Yeah.
And they're doing it. So at the end of the day, we've got to decide what are we actually voting for? Get out of the demagoguery of who you're voting for. But is the person and the party that you're voting for, are they working hard to make sure you can take care of your family? And if they are, ask yourselves how.
Yep.
How are they doing that?
Yep. Labor workers need to be part of that new platform, I think, going forward, right? We've seen the last several years, we've seen labor interest in labor, support for unions on the rise, nationally, locally. People want to be part of the labor movement, want to be part of a union. They know unions fight for better wages, better working conditions. I think people have had it with fast food wages and, crappy or no benefits at the most on their job sites, and they're seeing value in the unions, and that's come back. And certainly with a platform around workers going forward, is that like the message? Is do we have a Project 2029? That centers around workers going forward? I mean, they had one for 2025 and they're executing the hell out of it. We need a Project 2029 or 2028, whatever it is, that centers around workers, centers around unions. I think that's the chord that we need to strike. And how do you get your friends in the legislature that recognize that but don't have as a rapport with labor like you do? How do you get them to kind of rally around circle the wagons and get on board with labor and some of the bills that you're talking about?
I would say a lot of my colleagues, are on board already. Yeah. And I would say everything that we've accomplished in the House was done because House leadership actually understands the importance, right? To think that any one legislator is, the lightning rod to get legislation passed is a really undeveloped sense of how the legislature works, right? So I would say is that you don't have to have a relationship with organized labor to understand what's important to your constituents, right? At the end of the day, most of us run because we love our communities and we think that we have an opportunity to make our communities healthier and stronger. And that means having a good job, having access to a good job, having a job that allows you to take care of your family. This is it's not as complicated as sometimes I think we make it out to be, right? Sure. The platform is, every time we look at the opportunity to center our constituents, what does that mean? Who are we centering? And how are we ensuring their economic health and their actual health? And they're intertwined, right? You can't be healthy of the body, mind, or soul if you don't have economic security. It's just they're integrated. And so I think when we talk to, I think legislators are talking to their constituents are talking to us, you're talking to both our constituents and us. It's bringing it back to what matters, right? There are people who are going to use the word union and labor to try to shut down the conversation, right? What you can't shut down is, how are your constituents doing? Are they able to actually afford to live in the community? Are they able to, what does the food pantry look like? Because I can tell you in Cambridge and in Boston, we're seeing a rise in the need for people. We're seeing an expansion of food pantries, and we're seeing more people in the food pantry lines, and those people include people who work. We're going backwards here.
Oh, yeah.
And so the
Prices.
question has to be, when you have, I mean, Elon Musk is about to become the first trillionaire, right? The concentration of wealth in this country, it's not new. We've seen this playbook, and that's why unions were born, right? I want everyone to do well. I want everyone to do well. I want people to be able to take big risks and make big money, but it cannot be at the expense of those who make it possible. And I think if all of us are asking, how are our constituents doing? How are our neighbors doing? How are the teachers in our schools doing, right? How are the custodians who actually clean our building at the State House? How are they doing? And when you ask those questions, then you have to go deeper. What does doing well mean? But it goes back to the basics.
Yep.
Can you afford to live in your community? Can you actually not only have a good job, but can you get to that job? Or do you have to drive 2 hours to get to that job, right?
Yeah.
Are your children safe? Do they have good schools? Do we have childcare? So another bill, that I'm working on would actually allow us to take vouchers that families already get and give that voucher the flexibility so that families, if they have a daycare center that they're fortunate to be able to get into, they could take that if they need some extra hours to fit in care for the morning or evening. Many of our families, and certainly many of your members, have what we call non-traditional job hours. I'd say actually more people have non-traditional job hours. It's far more the tradition. But if you need to be on the job site at 7 a.m. and you need to leave your house at 6 a.m. and childcare doesn't open until 8:30, who's taking care of your child between 6 and 8? Or 5 p.m. you got to pick up your kid, or you're going to be charged a certain amount of money. Who's taking care of your kid between 5 and 7? We actually have a bill that we've been working on that would allow families to use vouchers that they already get allocated, and they don't use all those hours that are allocated because we're not giving them flexibility to use it with folks who could also take care of their kids during the non-traditional hours.
Yeah, great point, because affordability really ties into every conversation, and it ties into childcare better than all of them, right? Families have to have two working parents. I don't know any family anymore that has a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad. Both parents are working. And for those that are getting into the trades, whether they're females or whether it's traditional, the guys in the trades, both parents are working. They need daycare. Not everybody has a live-in mother-in-law or a family member that can take care of the kids. Most construction workers are out the door by 5 a.m. to be in Boston or Cambridge and fight for parking and traffic to start a job at 6 a.m. So the struggle is real when it comes to affordability for working people. And even IBEW members and 103 members and other building trade members that make good money. The grocery stores, the prices are up, the portions are down. It's hard to go out to eat. It's hard to get a pizza and a couple of bottles of soda for a family anywhere anymore to do anything. Never mind take a vacation or do anything like that. So tying in the affordability thing to daycare is so important.
Lou, I would just say this for all of us, right? When we think about how do we continue to elect people who will actually make decisions and take votes and lead on the things that matter to us the most.
Right.
We're not powerless, right? The cost of food going up, the cost of the inaccessibility of childcare that works for you,
Right.
The inability to work within a reasonable distance of your job, that's not inevitable. Those are policy choices that we have the chance to make every day. And so the question always going back to all of us, right, is are we electing people and are we shaping the kind of community that we want? Right? And again, you guys are doing that every day. Every day you're giving us the opportunity to shape the community we want. Whenever you win, whenever labor wins, we all win. Because it means that we have the chance to have the kind of communities that are healthier and safer. There's no debating that.
Right.
And so I think it goes back to what's the message? The message is, listen, not every elected official is going to be 100% of everything you want. That just doesn't make sense, right? But
Totally.
what are the top 3 to 5 things that are most important to you? And I would encourage us all to be talking about security. Because if you don't have your economic security, if you don't have your health, then you don't have anything else. My mother-in-law survived war and came to this country looking for a safer life. They left everything. They had a great life. Trust me, their life was much better where they were than when they came here. But at the end of the day, she always reminds me that the things that are that I can get stressed out about, are your children safe and are they healthy? Because that's all that matters to her. She gave up everything because that's all that mattered to her. And it's a really humbling reminder, right, that whatever else we think we're voting for, anything else that you want's a bonus, but it has to come after. Is this person going to make sure that we have an economy that works for everybody?
Yep.
Because when the economy only works for you and doesn't work for your neighbor, I promise you, you're paying for that.
Right.
Right. And that's a whole other podcast
Yeah,
to get into.
no doubt. Security is definitely top of mind, I think, for everybody, especially after the most recent, you've seen political assassinations. I was talking to my dad the other day. He's like, it's like the 1960s again with political assassinations and people that are getting gunned down on the street.
And can you imagine gunned down at their home, Lou?
Yeah.
Because you're an elected official and they want to change the balance of the votes. They're coming to your home and they're gunning you down, right? So, again, I will just say, again, this is a whole other podcast, right? But Massachusetts has one of the lowest gun homicide rates in the country, and I'm really proud to be a part of that. And I'm really proud that I have been in conversations with members. You asked me about my relationship with the building trades. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of members in the building trades who actually, are recreational gun owners and they believe in their rights to own guns. Mm-hmm. And yet they also believe in the rights to keep people safe, that guns should be locked up in a certain way, that people should actually be trained, that maybe you shouldn't be able to buy one within a few hours. And I've led on that, right? And so, I think I'm an example where I know that I have positions that not every member probably agrees with, but at the end of the day, when they have supported me and voted for me and helped me, it's because those top 3 to 5 things that are really important to them, I'm working on, and it's allowed us to have a relationship that talks about the other things that maybe are the 4th or 5th or 6th or 7th thing that maybe we disagree on, but we have a relationship.
Right.
And that, so I just think that that's part of it also, is how do we all say economic security and health are really important. Let's start there. And then everything else that we agree or not agree on, let's just put that over on the side, and then we'll have conversations about it.
Absolutely.
But when we can find out where we agree that it's important to eat. We agree that it's important to have a good job. It's important to have a place that you can afford to live in, that you can get to, that you have the transportation to get there, that you have the childcare that you need to do the job. Then we can start talking about those other things. But when we know what we agree on, it actually also humanizes us and builds a deeper connection, because we know, in fact, it's not us versus them. And that's, when you're alluding to sort of the political violence that's going on, right?
Crazy world.
People should be able to disagree and still live.
Yep.
And we should also be able to actually recognize that there's more to agree on and work towards, and that doesn't actually preclude us having to agree on everything.
Right, 100%. You talked a little bit a while ago about Elon Musk and going to be a trillionaire and all these billionaires, and the president of the United States a billionaire. Growing up, I watched Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, right? Everybody wants to dream about that, 100-foot yacht or whatever it is. But electing billionaires in this country is dangerous, slippery, not a good slope to be going down, because what working people need, it flies in the face what billionaires want, and that's, we need more money. Billionaires want all of it, and right now they're getting all of it.
Getting all of it. And I think, honestly, we want to know, do you know what it's like to struggle to make sure you can pay your mortgage?
Yeah.
To pay your rent? Do you know what it's like to see your child have a surgery and then stress about the cost of the follow-up for the physical therapy that's not covered, but it's actually what they need to get stronger, right? Mm-hmm. Do you know what it's like to worry about your elderly parents not getting the kind of care that they need as they age because the insurance doesn't cover it, right? And that you're having to make hard choices in your family all the time about how do you juggle this.
Right.
And I want people in office who have to actually grapple with those choices in their everyday lives.
Right.
Because that's what the majority of us are grappling with.
Right. They're canceling infrastructure projects. Certainly we're seeing it here in Massachusetts. Offshore wind is being canceled. Right, all these great infrastructure and energy projects, so we can line the pockets of billionaires through tax cuts, taking that money away from good jobs in infrastructure and energy and giving it to billionaires. It's backwards. And I've heard the argument, and certainly you're a big proponent for clean energy and wind, like all of us are. It's a jobs issue, right? But the clean energy, you take away those subsidies, and the project doesn't make sense anymore, those subsidies are important. And why should the wind industry get subsidies? Well, nobody gets more subsidies from the government than the gas and oil industry. Nobody complains about that. That's okay. But why are we taking it away from wind and stopping? We need more energy in this state than less. And
well, without a clean energy infrastructure, then we actually are not going to have a cleaner environment. Right. I mean, they go hand in hand. And I would say
and costs are going to go up.
Costs are going to go up. And I would say, credit to, the Speaker of the House who has made clean energy, a strong foundation and has said, if we don't have the clean energy infrastructure and the wind energy that we need, then we actually can't do more to ensure that we play our role in developing cleaner air, cleaner water. We have an opportunity in Massachusetts to contribute to that, right? We lost, you wrote a great letter to the president, and it's like one of those moments where you want your president, right? He's our president, like it or not, he's our president. Mm-hmm. Read that letter. $34 million, taking away from Massachusetts in mid process. Those are jobs. Those are opportunities for a stronger economy, which filters into the rest of our state. And people's lives are at stake right now, like their ability to take care of themselves. And you take away that job. I think, what are we looking at? 800 jobs possibly?
Up to, yeah. Absolutely, yep.
And across the country, maybe 20,000, but 800 right here in Massachusetts. If they're not working on that job, don't assume that they're going to have another job. And if they're not working, who's helping them with their rent? Who's helping them with their mortgage? Who's helping their kids with their health, right? Well, your tax dollars are, whether you like it or not. And so I really hope I go back to this question of when we choose to vote for people, what are we voting for? And I think one of the things we've not done a good job as a Democratic Party is really talking about what subsidies look like. Because corporations all kinds of industries are being subsidized all the time. It's invisible, though. Right. And they've done a really good job. The millionaires, well, now I guess it's all the billionaires, right? Have done a really good job at and this administration, by the way, there's a lot of them making a lot of money in ways that were unheard of previous to this. You would have to relinquish your financial investments. That's not happening. And in fact, government has become a place for them to actually enrich their businesses. And these aren't hard questions, but we're not doing a good job at getting the information out there. You are. You're out there talking, you're connecting the dots, but we need to be rowing in the same direction, connecting the dots.
Yeah, and that's why we're having this podcast, and that's why we're having these conversations, just to get the word out there on what's actually happening and what we can do about it, and electing those people that match the values about affordability, about daycare, about good health, and healthcare costs and everything else that everybody is under the burden of these days. It feels like everything just the walls are closing in on working class people, and it's good to have fighters like you on the front lines for us that have always had our back, and that's why we've always had yours as well. So
yeah, I mean, we have each other's back, because who are we centering, Lou? We're centering people who deserve the right to have the best possible life that they can have. That's who we're centering, right? Sure. I'm not centering you. You're not centering me. We're making sure that we know it's not inevitable that people don't have what they need to take care of themselves. Mm-hmm. We know that good jobs and good decisions about how those jobs become, emerge, guarantee people have better lives. And when people have what they need to care for them families, we have healthier, safer communities. Mm-hmm. That we're all rowing in the same boat in that way. And I really appreciate that when I get to partner with my friends in labor. It means that we're actually working towards making sure that people have, the best possible lives that they can have.
Sure. And as we wrap up, so politics is a contact sport these days, and it's also something that's very, very divisive. Divides families. We've all got that Thanksgiving dinner with that family member, right?
Yep, I do.
Right? We all do. Everybody does. The country's 50-50, right? It's really right down the middle. But as a labor movement, as we try to reorganize and focus on the things that we've been talking about during this podcast, and we go over, and we have one of the highest percentages of registered voters among our membership. And we work hard at it, and we go over to our apprenticeship training and talk to them about the importance of being a registered voter, whatever your party is. And we're getting a lot of pushback from younger members that are like, oh, I don't want to talk about politics. I don't want to be involved in politics. How do you talk to a young apprentice about why it's so important to look past the divisiveness and be a registered voter and the power in voting?
This is a great question, because it's not just your apprentices, right? It's just across the country.
It's everybody, right?
It's like when people, want to point to the building trades and say, your members voted for this. And I say, the country voted for this.
That's right.
Your members just reflect what's happening in the country.
That's right.
Right? And so pointing fingers doesn't actually change the course of direction.
Right. Or they stayed home, too, is another.
Or they stayed home. That's right. And so it's understanding, well, what will motivate people? Well, people have to believe that their actions and along with their votes actually make a difference and that they matter. And when I'm with particularly people in various, building trades or unions or SEIUs, I love reminding them that they help me get my start, right? So if they think I'm doing really good work, whether it's my work on children's mental health, right, or whether it's my work on PLAs or the anti-poverty work that I've done, all the work that I've done is only possible because, it was you, and you're a little younger, so I won't say, it was your father. It was other people who were not the business leaders then, but were the apprentices who had to, come and help me on my campaign, right? There's so many people today in leadership in the unions who started out as apprentices. And a lot of us grew up together doing this, but we were partnering. I was in my late 20s when we were doing this. They made it possible. And the more they educated me and the more that I understood what they were doing actually strengthened my community, the more I could advocate to strengthen what they needed to do what they were doing. And so I think I often tell that story probably a lot more eloquently than I am now, but it's a partnership, right? Your actions matter. And if you don't want to get out and vote, and you want to vote for someone who, speaks to some of the things that aren't connected to your ability to work and have good jobs, then this is where we're at. But we're going to lose this. And it's a failure on all of us, both in our communities and the leadership platforms we have, in our schools and our education, and in the labor movement, if we don't actually remind people how we got here. And that how we got here means still the ability to have good jobs and good pay and good health care benefits and to retire. It didn't just happen. And when people are able to take that for granted, blaming them and lamenting doesn't change that. So we got to do more. We got to bring people in who tell us stories of what it was like without this. And we got to make sure that we're also, educating people about what public policy, what opportunities people in government, like stop using even the word public policy, right? What people in decision-making roles, whether it's in unions or in elected officials in government, we have the opportunity every day to actually choose policies that either help people or hurt people, right? And for me, I always say, we're not doctors who take the Hippocratic Oath, but there is a Hippocratic Oath that I think for all of us in elected positions, you, myself, that if we do X today, does it help people? Does it hurt people? Does it keep the status quo? Like, you just got to keep asking yourself that. And we've got to get them to ask those questions. And I would always laugh when people say, well, I'm not political. I'd say, well, that's fine. You're just relinquishing politics evades every part of your life. How many seconds you have to decide to walk across the street is political.
Right. That's right.
Right? Whether or not there's a stop sign is political. People in elected office always are working to shape what our community looks like, what it feels like, what it smells like. Just all of this. These are shapes, these are decisions people in government are making. So it's a lot of work to stay politically engaged, but politics is not something separate from the rest of our lives.
That's right.
It is a responsibility every single one of us has. That's what it means to be a citizen.
Yep. There's that cliche. We say it all the time. But if we're not at the table, if we're not involved in politics, right? If you're not on the table, you're on the menu.
You're on the
you
menu.
You have to be fighting constantly.
And it's
or they're going to
work.
run you over or eat you alive.
And what I would say is, like, not everybody can be doing the fight, full throttle every day, and that's okay too.
Right, that's right.
But if you're, an apprentice and you have the chance to go hold a sign, because I promise you, like, that visibility is really important for an elected official, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have the chance to knock on doors or to drop a leaflet, what you're doing is you're helping somebody who you believe is going to make your life better.
That's right.
Simple as that. They believe in your ability to have the job that you have, get the wages that you have, and you need to make sure that they're back there, being able to make those decisions, right? And if they're not, someone else is going to do it, and they may not care about you.
Right.
And what we're
your
seeing
best
is
interest at
they
heart.
don't right
That's
now.
Right.
That's happening nationally. You have a lot of people, starting with the president, who actually don't care about you. And your best interest, by the way, is against their best interest, because their best interest is about filling their pockets.
That's right. Yep.
At your expense.
Right. Taking it out of your pocket and putting it in theirs, and they don't need the money.
That's right.
So as we wind down a little bit, when you take your activist, your fighter, your legislative hat on.
My heartbeat's like racing right now.
I love it. I love it. I love the passion that you bring to your job every day. It means a lot that you fight for us all the time. But when you take a breath and you get 5 minutes to take a breath, or you take your legislative hat on, that maybe a couple hours on the weekend, how does Marjorie Decker unwind? Is it Do you and your family, are you a beach people? Do you go for bike rides? What do you and your family do to unwind and to kind of reconnect after a hard day fighting up on Beacon Hill?
At this point in my life, I'm trying to work on the sort of like, what does it look like to recharge? Because I'm old enough to know that it's actually important in order for my ability to keep moving forward. So my kids are teenagers, which means that like they are out, usually not around me. So I actually will take that time to go for walks with girlfriends, just walking through the neighborhood, catching up with other moms. Like that's become a really important part of just filling my soul. It also means that like I've made decisions to, miss things that, maybe I should be at, but I'm going to go see my kid play basketball instead, right? Any opportunity I have to just, as a parent, I just say as a parent of a teenager, it's like, you just want to be around for the crumbs because you know
Right.
that they're so busy and like they just assume you're always going to be there, which is what they're supposed to be doing. So the moment that they want to give me some attention, I want to be there for it. And so recharging means making sure that I am really as present as possible in my kids' lives. And that's a balance because I can tell you there's times where I've been so consumed by work where I've just taken them for granted. And as you get older, you start to realize like, wow, this is like, we're not guaranteed tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so it is about just really trying to be more present in my life and knowing that I need to stay ahead of my health. Really not taking my health for granted, both my mental health as well as my physical health. And to be honest, it's a work in progress, but it's one that I'm committed to always trying to stay on top of. And staying on top of just like being connected to people. I think one of the most important things we can all do right now is being connected to people. I mean, one of the things I love about seeing you, I see you or I see Dawn or I see like just, a number of members here. It's like people who make me smile. People who like, I find such joy, and I'm going to get like a little emotional here, but honestly, I find joy in connecting with people who I know care about the world. And we don't have to be out working together on a policy, but just like seeing you,
Sure.
going, here's a person, I'm not alone in wanting to make this world better. So just that, like just surrounding myself with people in both formal and informal moments and saying, I'm just going to like share moments of joy, share smiles with people, connect. And that's a long-winded answer,
Yeah,
but
that's awesome,
that's
though.
about like how I'm right now, that I'm
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
recharge.
As much as we, love and support you professionally, it's also a friendship level with you that we've been able to develop by working together so much. And I know whether it's at an event after work or it's a rally or Labor Day, whenever my wife is with me and we run into you, she is over the moon. And you didn't tell me Marjorie was going to be. I'm so happy to
It's
talk
mutual.
to Marjorie. So yeah,
It's mutual. I
yeah.
mean, I think that's the best part of the work that we
Yeah.
get to do, right? Is that
Yeah.
when you find people who care about the world in the way that you care about it and you're working towards that, then there's that other element of like just you become friends with people,
Yeah,
right? And
right.
you get to know each other's families and that's what life is about,
Right.
right? It's not only the work, but it's about like if I care about your family and their success and you care about my family and their success, right? That's the stuff that keeps us centered in doing the work
That's
and
right.
the commitment that we have to each other, which drives the commitment we have to even people we don't know.
Yep. Yeah. Whenever if I have my wife with me or I have the boys with me and wherever we're out, if we're knocking doors, if we're holding signs, if we're rallying, if we're parading or celebrating, we always run into you. And I feel like you know my family like any of my other colleagues and coworkers. And it's
I
great.
love seeing
It's
your
great.
kids, and I
Yeah.
love seeing your kids, their success right now. Like when I see your son, like my heart just like glows.
Yeah.
And then Dawn and I get to compare. Our kids are like
Yeah.
the same ages right now. Okay, all right. So you're hearing this, you're doing this, and
Right.
just that's as that human element. You want to
Yeah.
know that you're not alone in the world, not only in terms of your work, but just as a person.
Yeah. Well, I got to just say thank you so much for making time for us down here and giving my new podcast a whirl and helping us out. It really means the world.
Listen, you don't need me to do this, but I was so honored to be part of this.
Yep.
And I've just been watching you like just on fire.
Yeah.
And like, I'm just going to keep blowing oxygen your way because that fire is just getting bigger and it's getting brighter and more people are being seen and more people are being centered.
Yeah.
And that's your leadership and the leadership team that you bring in and what you inspire amongst your members. And when your members are out there talking to elected officials, they're just talking about like their neighbors and their lives. And they're just like, we're just making the world better. And I just want to say thank you
Yeah, of
because
course, yeah.
I'm so proud of you, right? I'm not that much older than you, but I'm proud and grateful to be around people who are really just not talking about the problems, but also understand some of the solutions.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been working our asses off together for the last couple of years, working on legislation, working on campaigns. And, you know, you came to our union meeting last year to tell my members and our folks how much you appreciate what they do. And having you on to talk about what you do every day is just a way of us telling you how much we appreciate you and appreciate the fight and the hard work. So
Thanks, Lou. It's mutual.
Thank you
And
so
thank you
much,
to all
yeah.
your members every day who get up and actually make sure that the jobs that they're on are actually powering our lives, but also making sure that people are safe, right? That they can be guaranteed that the work that's getting done is actually going to enhance their lives. Because when it's not done by people who are trained and who cared, right? That's when we see, you know, communities are on fire, literally, you know, things falling apart. And I'm just grateful. I just get to share this moment with you.
Well, we really appreciate you being on the job with Local 103. So
Thank you.
thanks so much, Marjorie.
Thank you.
Awesome.